When you think about what a powerhouse woman embodies, I would bet that confidence is one of the first things that comes to mind. But where does confidence actually come from? And how can we cultivate the confidence to own our purpose and command our worth? Well, my guest today happens to be an expert in just that. Velera Wilson is a speaker, author, and success coach who helps ambitious women own their greatness in their careers, relationships, and everyday life. She's also the author of a new book in which she shares more about how to grow your confidence. We talk all about it in this episode, and in this conversation, she's giving us her best advice for the mindset, the beliefs, and the habits that can help you to increase your confidence in every area of life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I have such a bright light to share with all of you today. Velera, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me.
I'm so excited to get to talk. And really, this conversation and this topic, I was telling you, it's one that I get more requests than any other topic to hear. Our community wants to hear more about just how we can cultivate confidence, how we can step into the women that we know we're meant to be and really command our worth, our purpose in this world. So this is going to be good. I can tell already. So I would love if you would start with what journey has taken you to this point of being an expert, a success coach for ambitious women. You're an author, you have a book coming out. It would be easy as women to look at the surface level of what your life is right now and think, well, she's probably just always been really confident and sure of herself. We both are giggling because we all know that's not usually the case. But I would love if you would share the real story. What has brought you to this place and given you the experience to talk to women who also maybe struggle with finding that confidence within themselves?
Sure. So first of all, again, thank you, Lindsay, for having me. And I'm so excited to talk with you and your listeners. I think to your point, a lot of people will look at you, or I could look at you and assume certain things, right? You would assume based on someone's bio that they've always been there or that maybe they had it easy. And so for me, for the past almost 20 years, I have been in working for global brands, and leading as a marketing leader, leading teams, generating millions in revenue, moving around the country, managing teams. And you would think that was easy for me, but it's not. I can remember early in my life thinking, wow, how do I get to be successful? Because I was born to a single teenage mom. My mom was 15 when she got pregnant with me. And it wasn't a two-person household. I went through some traumatic things early in my childhood. I was the first person to graduate from college. And so everything I did was doing it scared, doing it alone, it felt like, and trying to figure it all out. I have my mother's loving mother and my father as well, but they could only take me so far in terms of insight and access. They didn't know how to help me navigate corporate America or navigate buying real estate or multiple pieces of property. They couldn't navigate me to financial freedom. Those are things that I had to figure out. And so that's where I've had to come from. But I think that's the beautiful part of the journey, is that's why I am confident in being able to tell other women that it doesn't matter where you've come from, what you didn't get, or what you felt like you should have got growing up or in your lifetime. Maybe those painful experiences, those past experiences that you'd rather forget, those things do not disqualify you. It does not mean that you cannot confidently command your worth today. And my life is a testament to that. And I'm sure there's many and millions of other women who can say the same thing.
Yeah. Do you find in the women that you work with that there tends to be this belief that we're the only ones feeling that sense of whether it's imposter syndrome or lack of confidence in certain situations? At what point did you realize, wow, I'm not the only one who feels this way?
Oh gosh, yes. I think to your point, absolutely. Most of us feel like we're in it alone until you start to sit with other women and talk about it, right? I mean, especially in today's society, right? Social media has everyone showing the highlight reels of their life, and they're working 80 hours a week and landed that client, or they're at that corporate event networking and shaking hands. But no one really shares their failures to that same degree.
Yeah.
No one really shares their fears to that same magnitude and puts the magnifying glass on and says, I'm terrified. I don't know what I'm doing out here. And so for me, and I think that's when we had talked earlier about even starting to write the book, is I did think it was just me. I thought, well, because your background isn't as squeaky clean as someone else's, because you didn't start with a 2-person household, you couldn't possibly have the same insight and access and walk into the same rooms with confidence as someone else who did. Everyone else is smarter than, better than, you name the thing than you. And so it wasn't until I started to progress in my career and learn things and connect with a lot of different women, from female founders to C-suite women, that and of different races, that I thought we had nothing in common, until we started peeling back those layers in conversations, and the conversation started to be around, gosh, I just got offered a promotion, but I'm terrified to ask for more money. How do I do that? Or I've got to pitch to these investors, but I don't even know if our product is good enough. Or I've got to go to this interview, but I'm just a nervous wreck. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? All these things, right? And so that's when the aha moments start to hit me, like, wait a minute, it's not just me. It's you too. It's you too, and you too. And so it started to feel like this common bond around this fear of, but yet having wild ambitions, right? So being wildly ambitious, but being terrified in the process.
Yeah, and you're making such a great point about sharing our struggles, because it's the struggles when we hear that other people have gone through or are currently going through something we feel, that it really unites us. It's not the highlight reel that makes us connect on a deeper level.
Not at all. Not at all.
So, the other piece of this, and I've heard you share examples now, talking about asking for more money, whether that's you're a business owner and you're creating your own worth in pricing your products and services, or asking for more money from an employer, asking for a raise. There's so many facets of our life that confidence at its core affect. So why is this such an important topic for us to discuss as women?
So, I mean, the stats are out there. Not to say that we aren't asking, but overwhelmingly, we aren't asking as often as maybe our male counterparts, right? If you look at the wage gaps, a lot of that is institution. There's no doubt about that. So I'd be lying if I didn't say that that's not the truth. But then there's also part of our responsibility as well, our personal responsibility. And that's the part that I tend to address, because I think, yes, I would love to wait until the institutions decided that they would want to give me, but I'd rather bet on me first. Let me bet on me asking first, and make sure I have the confidence to ask, so that if the institution hasn't caught up yet, let me go find the one that has, right? So I can change institutions, but I'm always going to take me to that institution, or I'm always going to take me to that business meeting where I'm pricing my products and services. So the constant is me, or you, us. So I think that's important to address. But to answer your question, I mean, it shows up in a lot of ways, right? So when we are figuring out, how do we say, it's important, because when you look at the stats today, we do have wage gap. And I was reading some stats a couple months ago talking about it actually even starts with right out of college, that the wage gaps start there.
Wow.
And that when we don't ask for that extra 5,000 and you multiply that over course of a lifetime and job roles and changes, you start to put yourself in the negative, and that translates into hundreds of thousands of dollars of earning potential over the lifetime, which means it impacts your quality of life, your retirement, where you live, how quickly can you pay back your student loans. It impacts, if you're a business owner, if you don't price your products and services the right way because you're not confident in that, then you're working a lot of hours, but the ROI is not as strong for you. So I think it goes back to very practical and tangible reasons why it's very, very important today, because women are opening businesses now more than they ever have. So we need to have the confidence to run the business, the confidence to ask for the contract at the premium price and not underbid ourselves. If we're going to go into the C-suite or the mid-level roles or wherever we are in corporate, because we're overwhelmingly there and we are getting more degrees than really our male counterparts, we need to be paid for it. So confidence of it impacts the bottom line and also your peace of mind and living a life of regret or not.
Yeah. And man, that last piece, living a life of regret, how often I can think of countless scenarios where I didn't go after an opportunity or was waiting until I felt a little bit more confident or ready before I stepped forward. And I'm sure we can all nod along and think of times we've done that. But I think at its core, when I look at those situations in my own life, it came down to a belief or a lack of belief, right? So what are some of those fundamental beliefs that we may not even be conscious of that are actually driving the bus, whether we realize it or not, when it comes to how we approach certain situations in business or just in life? What have you found from your work with women?
Gosh, you said a mouthful right there. I mean, it's so true. It goes back to the belief, and you said it's subconscious, unconscious, undoubtedly, hands down. So I have found that there's something that you mentioned, a couple of things. Hesitation. The hesitation often comes because we're not sure what we're worth, and we're not sure if we are enough. We're not sure if we're enough. And that question swirls around, am I good enough for this position? Am I good enough to start the business? Am I good enough to promote this? Am I smart enough? Why would they buy the product from me? Why would they hire me? All of these am I's, and it all goes back to worth. And that's overwhelmingly, I think you may have even heard the stats that talk about oftentimes women will feel like they need to be 90% qualified for the position before they even apply. It's that sense of I need to be perfect in order to step into something, in order to be good enough for it. And that is an overwhelming belief that can keep us stuck or hesitant. And it's so important, I think, for us to realize that perfection is not the prerequisite for pursuit of a goal. It's progress. It's being patient with yourself and understanding that while you are not perfect, you are making progress, and your value today fundamentally is absolute. It's not changing. You're good enough today, and you'll learn what you need to learn when you get to the next step, but you don't need to be perfect today to be qualified for the next step.
Oh, you're speaking some straight truth. And I will raise my hand and admit that perfectionist gene. Okay, so you girls are not alone if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, so here I'm going to ask the real question. Okay, that's great, right?
Come on,
we probably all have. If you're like me, let's just step into my life. All of the quotes pinned about how progress is better than perfection. I know it logically, and then I show up, go to launch that course or that product or put myself out there, and I'm paralyzed. So it's how do we go from knowing, logically knowing, okay, perfectionism is not going to get me where I want to go, and actually doing it? I would love to hear your tips because I'm always looking for new tools for my own toolbox.
A simple one, but it's an absolute true one. You're just going to have to do it scared.
Oh, I didn't want to hear that.
We have to, right? We do, but it's
so true.
We have to do it scared, realizing that fear is an indicator. It's not it's not, it's an indicator of us stretching ourselves,
Yeah.
reaching into something unknown. It's not an indicator of us being unqualified or incompetent or incapable. So often I feel like in my own life as well, the fear became the determining factor of my worth. Well, because I'm afraid, that means that I'm probably not good enough. That's why I'm afraid of this, because I can't do that job. I can't start that business. I can't launch that course because I'm not good enough. That's the only reason why I'm afraid. But the reality is that people do things terrified, people that we probably look up to every single day, right?
Yeah.
And they do it scared. And that's the only difference between those that are successful and move forward and those that aren't, is it's what you choose to do, what we choose to do with the fear, Lindsay. It's, hey, I see it, I feel it, but I'm going to use it as an indicator of an emotion, not an indicator of truth about my capability. So I'm going to put it in the back seat. And actually, that's one of the things I talk about in the book is, making the shift. Make the shift is to put fear in the back seat and do it scared.
Yep. Just don't let it drive.
Don't
Hands
let it
off
drive.
the wheel.
It is. And I mean, when you realize that, I think what I've had to realize in my own life is, okay, would I rather live with regret, or would I rather live with the failure of something? Yeah. Because the failure means that I tried it and it didn't work, but but you can fail a lot of times, right? Because just because it didn't work that way doesn't mean it's not going to work another way.
Yeah.
But if I live in regret, that's a totality of an experience. I regret that I never did anything at all. I didn't even get to fail to figure out, okay, maybe it doesn't work like that, but I can try it another way. You'll never know. And that just would eat me up. I'd rather fail now. And I think that's where we got to get confident and say, okay, I'm going to fail at this. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, so much easier said than done. But if you're listening and you are feeling for me, when I go to think about taking that next bold step, it's a literal, like, visceral feeling in my body. Sometimes it feels like heaviness on my chest. It feels like everything in me is resisting this growth. But on the other side of that is the possibility of something really freaking cool. So
I call it the 2.0 version of yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And it's something I actually talk about in the book. It's like, if you think about the latest iPhone, right? When we started with the first iPhone, it was like back in 2008, maybe. I think that was the time. So it was the bare minimums. We knew nothing about what the X or what, I don't even know what version we're on right now.
I don't either.
I don't know. But that's the point, is that they've made so many evolutions of this thing. And so I always like it to say, okay, can you imagine when they've made the first version of the iPhone? They went back to the lab and said, okay, the engineers, the testers, all of the product folks, okay, this was good. How do we make it better? I can only imagine how many hours were spent tinkering, testing, pulling it apart, examining it to see, how do we make this better? I think that we're the same way, is that when we decide that 2.0 version of us is worth the growth, the tinkering, the changing, the prodding, the testing, sometimes it can push us to say, okay, you know what, this might be uncomfortable, but I know it's part of the growth process, and I'm going to love the 2.0 version of me. So I'm going to go through this for this uncomfortable period, because when the next version of me is released, it's going to be bad. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. You know what I mean? And you just got to you got to really think that through and think about, what are you worth? Are you worth the uncomfortable process, which is only temporary, to get to that next phase of you? And it's a constant evolution.
And it really ties back to what we were saying earlier about the less than pretty version that we see on social media, the struggles that we all go through. How do those play into this whole growth process? What can we do to reframe our mindset around the struggles? Maybe for a lot of people, this year has been full of struggle. Mm-hmm. How can we reframe that to see our own growth within it?
Sure. And it is a very challenging time for everyone, and some more than others. For many women have been impacted by job loss, may have been impacted by the loss of loved ones, maybe struggling right now with being at home as a full-time mom and, a home school teacher and a full-time cook and an employee or a business owner. It's just a lot that's going on right now for a lot of women. And I think the one thing I think about, and as I've even been talking to myself, I talk to myself, nobody responds,
Me
but I talk to
too.
myself. I talk to myself. And I think it goes back to that perfection thing, is to realize to give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
It's to give ourselves the grace to say, I can only get so many things done today, and I may not get it all done. I won't be perfect at it all, but I'm going to prioritize what's most important to me today. And tomorrow will have to take care of itself. And then as it relates to just reframing things, I think it goes back to just, are you able to anchor in some type of truth for yourself? What can you take a moment to pause and be thankful for? For me right now, I have family members that were impacted by COVID, but they survived. And so I'm able to take a breath and say, I might be busy right now and things may not be perfect, but I have those couple of nuggets that I can at least step back and be thankful for. Or I do have, I do have income. So whatever it is that you can anchor in on right now to help you focus on what's good as opposed to what's not so good, I think that can help, not just in this time, but in any time of life.
Yeah, and so, so vital to remember in a season where there's uncertainty. And for the
Yes.
entire world right now, there is. But
Yes.
there's always something to be grateful for in the midst of uncertainty. Such a good reminder.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, as we're thinking about this whole conversation of confidence, whether it's a woman listening who is wondering what's next for her, or this season of life does look much different than she thought it would at the beginning of 2020, or there might be some who are really thriving. They've really stepped up and taken on the challenge of pivoting and reinventing themselves. Wherever our listeners find themselves right now, what's the first step to finding that next level of confidence for each of us? No matter where we're starting off, what does that journey look like? Because I know for me, it's been an ongoing journey. I don't think it'll ever end. I don't think we arrive at confidence.
Right.
Like, we've made it, check the
No.
box.
Nope. You don't get a confidence badge. And it's like, I've got my badge, I'm good to go. It's a lifelong process.
I really wish there were accessories that came along with it, like a Girl Scout
Me too.
badge, perhaps
I
like
was going
a
to
cool
say Girl
brooch.
Scout. There you go. Some flash or something.
Right. So what can we each do on a daily basis? We talked about habits and beliefs. Where does that start? How do you help women cultivate that sense of confidence that does start to permeate into their everyday life?
Sure. Great question. So the first thing I like to say is start a running tab on your successes and your wins. Because sometimes in the pursuit of what's next, or in the process of transition where things are uncertain, it's so easy to forget the past successes and wins. And most importantly, to forget how far you have come. And when you're in the thick of the fog and in the frustration of change, or things that didn't happen like you want, it's so easy to forget that, wow, I did this, I did that, all these things. And so I always say, get a running tab. Think about how far you've come to get to where you are today. Think about that for just a minute. Even if you say, well, I'm not that far, but you've done something that has gotten you to where you are. It might be, it could be, and I think of times when for example, when I would get nervous in situations to ask for a salary, I would start writing down, okay, you spent hours studying late at night, pulling all-nighters. You had to pay loans back. You've spent hours at work. You've moved around the country. You've done all these things that were uncomfortable, unsettling, all these things. You need to go in there and ask for that, because you have so many things that have kept you scared, or that could have kept you scared, but you didn't allow it to. And so that becomes really, really important, I think, for women to really think about their wins. When they start to feel nervous and unsettled and unsure, think about the wins. Get a Rolodex, a mental Rolodex in your head that says, oh, okay, I did all of these things. By the time you're done, you'll start to say, wait a minute, I need to go in there. It's like you have to boost yourself up with all your collection of memories, That's one big way to do it.
Okay, I love that so, so much. And I also have, and I'm just going to speak from personal experience again, something that I've really had to develop confidence around is not feeling like owning my greatness was a sign of me being full of myself, or fill in the blank, right? There was this, just this belief, and I think it was, I don't even know where it came from, that if I was too loud or shined too bright, it might make other people uncomfortable. So I had better, dull it down, cover it up, be more humble. You're shaking your head like emphatically. I'm like, I'm just going to tell all of my truth because I know that so many other women deal with that too. What do you say to women who are really struggling? Maybe they can own those achievements in private, but then the moment someone goes to acknowledge them or shine light on their greatness, they want to pull back.
Lindsay, you are all in the book is all I'm going to say. You're all in the book. And yes, I will just tell you that I was actually going to name the book On Your Greatness, by the way, but I didn't name it that.
That would have been a great title too.
It was. Someone took it, but it's fine. But yes, that you have to go back to why. Where did you learn that? And I think a lot of times as women, we were taught to, and I actually wrote a blog on that too, is that sometimes we were taught as women that if we shared our accomplishments too much, that no one likes an arrogant woman, or that you're too cocky. That's not an attractive feature. So a lot of things have been cultural and conditioned in us as women, that we need to be shy. We need to be humble. You said that word, humble. You need to be modest. All the things that does not translate into being confident and sharing what you know. And so for me, confidence, I always make there's a distinction. Confidence is not cockiness. Confidence is knowing the value that you bring and not being afraid to share that. That to me is what confidence is. Confidence means I'm just as good as the next person in the room. Cockiness means I'm better than you.
Yeah.
So there's a difference. And sometimes we try to over-index on the other end to show that we aren't confident, and we end up shrinking and hiding and just diminishing our own value for the sake of what may look good in social settings. But the reality is that we are not owning the gifts that we were given. And so I always say to any woman, when you are confident, you are owning the gifts that you were given and put on earth here to share. Yeah. When you don't do that, you're dishonoring those gifts. You're dishonoring them. And most importantly, you're keeping the solution that you might have for someone else hidden and tucked away.
You're being stingy.
Yes, stingy.
That's the word that immediately popped into my mind as you're sharing all that. I'm like, man, isn't that true? It's so stingy to hide or even just dim in the slightest the gifts that we have that could impact someone else.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I typically ask this question at the end of every interview, but it ties in so well with what we're talking about with, being bold, being unapologetic. So we call it your powerhouse moment. But because I know that it is so important to be able to pause and acknowledge, add to that list of wins on an ongoing basis, we challenge all of our guests to think about a moment that happened within, the last week or two, like recent history, and it could be big or small, but a moment that right now in this moment, you're looking back and saying, wow, yeah, I was a total powerhouse in how I handled that, how I showed up, how I operated in the face of fear. What is like the first example that comes to your mind from your personal experience in the last few weeks?
Gosh, the first one comes to mind is actually a panel that I was on recently. A women's panel had almost 500 attendees, and it was a conversation about race, courageous conversations about race. Yeah. I was on a panel of about 5 other women of different races. And it was the first time in my career, in my professional life, that I'd ever been asked to have that type of conversation. Wow. And as a Black woman, sometimes that conversation has required courage, because depending on the setting, it can be interpreted as whatever the euphemism, or not even euphemism, the phrase might be, oh, are you angry about something? Oh, are you being super sensitive? Or people didn't mean it that way. All the things that can be said about being a Black woman in my professional life. And so for the first time, I was actually able to share my voice as a woman, as a Black woman, about race, and have an audience of people from all different types of levels at different companies, at different settings and businesses to hear. And then from there, it was about an hour webinar. And afterwards, to get so many messages on LinkedIn from so many women and men to say thank you. Thank you for being honest. I felt the authenticity. Thank you for having that courageous conversation. Thank you because I learned, I'm inspired, I want to be an ally. All these things. They may not have gotten that message. Maybe they would have from someone else, but to get it from me and for me to own my voice and my power and not to use and not to be afraid or being hesitant to talk about it, because it's a much needed topic right now. So for me, that was absolutely my powerhouse moment.
And you're pointing out something we've been talking about a lot within this community, and you're right. It's a long overdue conversation that really needed to come to the forefront. And while I'm not grateful for the circumstances that led to it, there's this open door to have conversations so much more openly now. And voices like yours are so important in that. That is cool.
Yeah, it was a powerhouse moment for me. Thank you. See, that
cool.
goes back to it. I had to think about it too, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Put it on the list.
Checking it twice.
Check it oh my goodness. Well, every time I get to ask that question of our guests, it also has me pause and think about it. And so it ties in perfectly with what you were sharing about if you don't have one of those lists for yourself. Those of you listening, this is your challenge, because we're all about action around here too. I want you to take a screenshot of your list of wins, even if you just started it and it's one. And maybe it's that you bathe today. Whenever I wash my hair, I feel like that should go on the list of wins, especially in quarantine.
Absolutely. That's right. Whenever I give myself a new manicure in quarantine, I feel like there's a win.
The wins right now can be very small, ladies, but I really want you to take this challenge on. Don't just listen to it and be inspired by what Velera shared. Take a screenshot. I want you to post it to Instagram, your stories if you're feeling bold and brave, and I want you to tag both of us. We want to see your wins. We want to virtually give you a fist bump through the internet, and I want to see more women sharing their powerhouse moment or your wins or your brag book, whatever you want to call it. You can give it a fun name. But especially now, as we start to kind of tie this all together with a pretty little bow, why is it more important than ever to have these little rituals, these habits, work on our beliefs, especially in a time where I think the only thing we can guarantee about 2020 is that it's going to be pretty uncertain. Not like life wasn't uncertain before, but now we're like really sure it's uncertain. Why is it more important now than ever?
I think for exactly the reasons that you just mentioned. We are dealing with so much more uncertainty right now than ever. And you just don't, with that, okay, I'm dealing with a power outage at the house.
I know, look at that. It looks like disco lights.
That's weird. Okay. So to answer the question, okay.
That's funny.
Really, really weird. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So really, there's so much uncertainty right now for everyone. And because we're dealing with so many different challenges and the pressures of, if you have a job, will you keep that job? Or if you are working right now, how much more hours are you working in the day? Because so much is uncertain for a lot of companies and you want to show value. Or if you have a business, now you've got to pivot that business completely because maybe the products and services aren't, the way that you were delivering them aren't ideal now. So I think for that reason, that is why confidence is so important, that you've got to know that the external environments might change, but who you are and what your value is does not. And it's not dependent on a title. It's not dependent on the business. It's not dependent on, so often our confidence is dependent upon acceptance, dependent on the company that says yes to us, or the company that acknowledges us the way that we want it to, or the customer, the client, the business that we start that is successful. At some point, we have to decide that, I have value intrinsically, and that wherever I go, I'm going to deliver that value. And that for me is where confidence lies.
Yeah. And I feel like the other hidden meaning in what you were saying that I picked up from you is that, in a time like this, it's almost the best opportunity to develop that confidence in the face of uncertainty versus when things are just going really great and we're getting the external validation that we want. It really gives us the opportunity to develop that.
True. I mean, just you said it, you hit the nail on the head. It's easy to be confident when things are going well, but the character and the development of you is it happens in the fire. It happens in the uncertainty. It happens in the unknowns. I mean, for me, I'm a first-time author. I didn't know this process. So when I tell you that I'm walking out understanding the confidence, that's exactly what it is. And I've just had to walk it out and say, you know what? Yes, for example, I decided to self-publish because I wasn't going to wait for someone else to say yes to me. I was going to say yes to myself. And the great thing is that the response has been overwhelming. But I had to know that even before I started, that it may or may not be exactly as you want it to happen. It may turn out like you want it to happen. It may not. But this thing that you have inside you, this book that you have in your belly has to be birthed. You have a voice, you have a purpose, you have a gift. Own it, and the rest will follow. And that's exactly what's happening.
And there's nothing like writing a book to push you to the edge of everything that's comfortable. I'm with you.
You already know.
Okay, so tell us about the book. When does it come out? What is it called? Where can we get it once it's available?
Sure. So the official pub date is 9/29. So remember that date, 9/29, 2020. And the name of the book is You're Absolutely Worth It. Release Self-Doubt, Embrace Confidence, and Own Your Yes. And the book is about really everything that we've talked about today. I like to call it, it's not this pie in the sky or this book for any woman that's always been on the top. This is for the woman who's felt like she's been at the bottom. So this is that sisterly sit down session that's like, let me tell you exactly, my sister, what you are worth and why you can go do that thing. And it's really designed to really help women shift past the self-doubt, to relentlessly pursue the things that they have often not even spoken about. So the ability to say yes to themselves and to show up with a greater level of confidence, regardless of where they've come from or where they want to go. And it can be found on Amazon as early August for pre-orders, and or on my website, VeleraWilson.com, or on Instagram at @apositiveid.
Oh, well, I know I cannot wait to get my hands on a copy. You are such a light. Thank you so much for how you're showing up and serving in the world right now. And thank you for getting out of your own way and writing this book so that we can all have a piece of your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I have enjoyed our conversation for sure.